Hello and welcome to FtLoC, which this week comes to you live recorded from last week's Goodwood Festival of Speed. But before we cut to all of that good stuff, I just wanted to remind you to be subscribed and to hit the bell icon on the YouTube channel, and that will keep you up to date with all of the amazing stuff that we do on the channel. And if you want to read our full write-ups and see our full galleries, check out carfection.com. You can find us on Facebook, under the name Carfection, on Instagram at Carfection Films, and on Twitter just plain old at Carfection. Anyway, without further ado, let's cut to past Drew live at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. Hello and welcome to a special episode of FtLoC this week, coming to you from the Goodwood Festival of Speed, which, if you're watching this on the Saturday, happened exactly a week ago. And we have a podcast that we put out last week and a bunch of social clips that you will have hopefully already seen. This is an opportunity for us to take some of the highlights and put them into one package for you to enjoy. I'm here today and Henry will be here over the weekend, so between us we'll be able to cram in quite a lot of the show. And we're starting here at the Mini Stand. Being a British show, British brands are heavily represented, even those that are owned by Germans. And Mini have got two very significant cars here that we have already seen before, but it's nice to have them here for their British debut. Inside is the GP concept, reminding us that Minis can actually look incredibly aggressive and probably go like stink as well. It reminds us that Minis have been motorsport heroes in the past and, very much could be again in the future. Possibly the more significant car here though is this, the Mini electric concept. Again, we've seen it before, this is its British debut, but we are now incredibly close to that car actually being a reality. We're going to see it on roads as early as next year, and although we don't have any clear stats on charging time, range, anything like that, what we do now know is this is damn near close to what the actual finished product is going to look like, including those amazing looking asymmetric wheels. Whether or not this proves to be the electric car that tips the balance in BMW's favor, or whether it will disappear into nothingness remains to be seen, but it's very interesting to see how many manufacturers here are pushing their electric cars. And in terms of looks and design, this has changed just enough to be interesting and not too much to have lost its mininess. So well done to Mini's new head of design. Very interesting concept on the grille because it doesn't need a grille anymore. It's still got kind of a gaping mouth in it. I'm not too sure what I feel about that, but it still keeps that mininess going. Now, Porsche aren't the only company here celebrating a big anniversary. In fact, they're not even the only company celebrating a 70th anniversary. Also here, our very own homegrown Lotus, exactly the same age. And to celebrate their birthday, Lotus have brought some amazing looking cars to the Goodwood Festival of Speed, including this Exige Cup 430. But it's the car on which this car's livery is based that I'm more attracted to, something a little bit more my age, something a little bit quicker, and that is Mario Andretti's Type 79 1978 Formula One car in John Player Special livery. You'll be hard pushed to find something better looking at the show. Now obviously the Goodwood Festival of Speed is so large we could never bring you everything that was actually on show here, so I wanted to spend a little bit of time focusing on one of my favourite sections, slightly away from the craziness of the hill climb and the ferocity of the motorsport cars, is the Cartier Styly Luxe paddock, where an eclectic selection of cars from Citroens, Bijous, 2CVs, obscure, common, everything can have a category, but there's some cars over here that I want to focus on a little bit more. Cutting right behind you, as long as George, who's expertly walking backwards, I must say, doesn't trip over it, are a selection of Jags. Now these cars represent some of the design highlights. Okay, we're not that far from the hill climb, there is still quite a lot going on. Some absolutely gorgeous cars here. You forget how varied Jaguar's design eras have been. And there's some absolutely gorgeous metal here. The XK150 and the XK120, cars that had exquisite motorsport heritage and success, but were also great road cars as well. Really, really good looking. But not even the best cars here, not even by a mile. Porsche are obviously celebrating their big birthday this year, and as such at the Cartier stand there are quite a few classic Porsches on show, including some absolutely pristine looking 356 Speedsters. The 356 obviously being a precursor to the 911, and you can see so much of that 911 shape to come in those cars. But the car I'm most excited about is this one. The one thing that strikes you about the 550 when you look at it now is how dangerous it actually looks to drive. And no wonder it claimed as many lies as it did. Now there are a few more categories of cars that they have here. This area here is dedicated to beautiful people and beautiful cars and is littered with Daytonas and other Ferraris and brutish looking 1970s Aston Martin. There was something so muscly about that car that kind of defies its Britishness. But my favourite part of Cartier this year is a section that's definitely dedicated to people of my age. Come around this way. I feel a bit like Martin Brundle on an F1 grid. 1993, the year of the first Festival of Speed. I would have been the ripe old age of 11. George would have been -5. And it was I'm going to say it was a golden era for supercars, for maybe the pre-hypercar era, and probably the poster child of it all is this one here. Gordon Murray designed McLaren F1, the car that broke all the records and then sat on them for years and years to come. Some have only just been broken now. And it's a good looking car. Not my favourite. Not my favourite here. There's a better looking one, and we'll come to that in a minute. Speaking of Gordon Murray, actually, sweeping past the De Tomaso, doing it criminally little justice. I mean, that's hot in its own right. But I wanted to talk about this. Gordon Murray design. Now, Gordon Murray is famous for the McLaren F1, as well as fan cars, the Brabham fan car in Formula One. But he was attuned to the lightweight nature of what cars needed to go quicker. And this was the Light Car Company, under his name, built this. Gordon Murray was at the cutting edge of automotive design then, and arguably could be again soon. We're still looking to see what comes out of Gordon Murray's new company. But that car that I thought was better looking than the F1 is this. The Jaguar XJ220, the almost car, the not quite there car, the car that was meant to have a glorious V12 but shipped with a V6, the car that was meant to get to the titular 220 miles an hour but didn't. But what we were left with is probably the best looking Jaguar of all time. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say it was the best looking Jaguar of all time, and dare I say it, the best looking car of all time. That was my poster car as a child. And we end up here with the last car on the route. The car that looks like so many things you might see in your own Carfection and magazines. A car that looks somewhat familiar but alien at the same time. The EB110. Now, there was a time where there were no Bugattis on the road at all, and there was nothing really much to put to the Bugatti name other than its historic legacy. And then that came along. A good 13 years before we actually saw the Veyron, the EB110 was a bizarre looking car that was just absolutely phenomenal. You see, design touches like that made it into things like the Ford GT90 concept, that thick wedge shape that was kind of iconic of that era, and then translated on and became things like the Veyron and now the Chiron. Savagely beautiful. I still prefer the XJ220 though. Every year the centre point of the Goodwood Festival of Speed is the epic sculpture placed in the middle of the green directly in front of the house, and this year is no different. It being Porsche's big anniversary, they have the honour of providing the sculpture this year, and this is it. And that pointy thing up there is adorned with some of the highlights of Porsche's 70 years of excellence, including such amazing highlights as the 959 rally car in the Rothmans livery, which looks fantastic, the 919 Tribute, which just destroyed the Nürburgring record, the 911R, and just a 918 Spider thrown in for good measure. Very spiky, very cool.
Henry was at the Goodwood Festival of Speed as well, of course, and he went up the hill in an Aston Martin Signet, which doesn't sound very fun until you realise that this one had been modified with a V8. We'll have a full clip of that coming soon to the channel, but here's a slight taster while you're waiting. It wasn't just Henry going up the hill. I went up in the Brabham BT62, something that you'll see some footage of coming soon to the channel, but I can show you a quick clip of here, and that was an absolute blast. But it wasn't just the hill where the exciting driving experiences were to be had. There's already a film up on the site of my experience of getting to drive along with Mad Mike Whiddett, the drifter from New Zealand who rides for Red Bull, who is in town to promote Drift Shifters, the big drifting event coming to Liverpool in August. And the smile on my face took quite a while to come out, and the damage we did to Goodwood was very audible.
You can immediately tell when you get in the car with someone if they know what they're doing. Is that the smoke alarm that's going off?
Now, you bump into a lot of familiar faces at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and this year was no different. And spotting our old friend Alex Goy there, it seemed rude not to sit down with him and have a bit of a chat about the festival and what he's been up to.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, actually. It's been a good, busy day. I'm good tired, but I am definitely tired. And I'm almost certainly sunburnt because all of my skin hurts.
You've already done your hill run today.
I've done today's hill run, well, hill runs, I suppose. Like you, I went up in the Brabham, which was unbelievably good.
We'll talk about the Brabham a little bit in a minute, yeah?
And then a Lotus Evora GT 430. So,
what do you make of the sculpture this year?
every year the sculpture blows me away, and it makes me angry that it blows me away, because this one is super special. Have you seen how thin the bottom of it is?
I haven't specifically looked at how thin it is.
Right, so it goes up to this amazing star, this explosion of Porsche, but the whole star motif is actually carried down. So the column starts off really wide, but then goes down.
Tapers into a point.
I can almost get my hands around it. I have small hands, so maybe someone with normal size hands like you.
Oh no, I've got quite small hands as well.
Have you got child hands too?
Yeah.
Okay, but you will almost be able to get your hands around it.
I'll do my best.
And the cool thing about it is, with all of these Goodwood statues, those are real cars.
Yeah.
It's not, they drain the fluids, they find a way to connect them to a big stick in the sky, and those are real cars. So that 911R is more than likely the one we shot a few years ago.
There you go. Yeah, it looks exact same livery on it. So the white with the red stripe. What is Goodwood for you? I mean, people I guess we come most years, if not every year. But it's not a trade show; it's a public show.
Yeah.
So, for those who don't come or who have never been, how would you describe it to people?
So I've been coming to Goodwood for the thick end of a decade now. Admittedly for work purposes, but I've always found it fascinating because Goodwood itself is an amazing leveller. There's no we're better than you or you don't like this, therefore you're not welcome. Everyone here is here for the same reason. They like fast cars, noise, they like motoring, they like to feel it and experience it. And you can get, so that in the Cartier lawn, you don't need an extra ticket to get in there, you just walk up and you can be this far away from a McLaren F1. See, my jam is supercars and sports cars, so this is my end of the show. I always hang around down here because I can pitch up next to the driveway, watch some cars, hear some noise, smell some smoke, and that's fine. But if you don't care about this, go up the hill further and you end up at a rally stage where there's all those rally cars that you saw when you were a kid and thought, wow, that would be wicked, I'll never get to see that live, and then you see it live and you can lose yourself in it. It's something that no one really does quite like the British, but other than the British, no one really does.
You've already talked about the Lotus that you drove up, but both of us have done passenger drives in the Brabham BT62.
Yes.
Seeing it in motion is key, and David was the first to admit that the hill run at Goodwood is not the best place to show off the car.
That needs a track with lots of space. It needs space to breathe. But the thing was, he was going 5/10 maybe, and it was still phenomenal. The noise, the feel of it. It's a very tactile thing,
There is no concession to MVH. There's no cooling breeze through an air conditioning unit.
Oh man, I didn't realise fingernails could sweat, but it turns out they can.
That's interesting and gross at the same time.
It was revolting, yes.
That's horrible.
It looked like I was literally dissolving.
We've got Henry Catchpole lined up to drive it in a couple of weeks, and we'll get his esteemed opinion on how it actually handles as a race car. And it is worth mentioning that, as you I'm sure you're well aware, Alex was with Carfection for many years and then wasn't for a while.
Yes, I went away. All I'll say is, and you may have to edit this bit out, I've said many stupid things before on video and in public, and sometimes to my mother. But I do believe the biggest mistake I made was hello and welcome to Motor 1. So, you know, that happened, and now I'm sort of backish, but not.
Well, I'm not editing that out.
Yeah,
I'm
good.
going to keep that in. But yeah, so Alex has already been on the channel in a couple of films that have gone up recently. One talking about Porsche owes you nothing, says Alex Goy.
Yes, and the comments on that are brilliant.
As we were fully expecting. And there will be some more stuff coming up in the very near future. But for now, Alex, thank you very much for joining us on the FtLoC podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be sort of backish.
Backish.
I'm
Back-ish.
not back for good. I'm just kind of here, hanging round the corner like a stray dog or a bad smell.
Now, if you'd like to hear the entire conversation that Alex and I had about everything Goodwood and Carfection related, then you'll need to find it in our audio podcast. Look for Carfection for the love of cars wherever you find your podcasts, be that iTunes, Stitcher or other, and download and subscribe to the podcast there. You'll get a whole bunch of stuff that you can only get there in the audio podcast, and you can listen to it on your run or commute or wherever you like to have interesting things going on in your ears. Look for Carfection for the love of cars, the orange logo, that's the one. Subscribe and you won't regret it, I promise. But there was so much more going on at Goodwood, and one of the most fun things to do is just wandering around, taking in the sights and sounds and smells of all the amazing cars that are around there. So I went for a bit of a wander. George followed along so we could see what we could spot.
Now, as nice as the Porsches were here earlier, the overall price tag has gone up somewhat, and there are some seriously expensive cars here. I'm seeing a 3-litre CSL, I'm seeing an M1, race spec BMW M1, a car that just, one of those cars that looks so right with the spoiler. Obviously the regular road going one didn't have the spoiler on it, but it just looks so good. It's that kind of Italian influence design on a German car is absolutely spectacular. There's some stuff here that I don't even know what it is. Classic Alfa Romeos. Oh, these beasts of cars here, all from the pre-war era. The insanity of some of these cars, the sound that they make is just an experience to behold. When we were at Le Mans this year with BMW, it was the 8 Series, the M8 that was running on BMW's behalf. Obviously they were there to launch the road-going 8 Series as well. And a lot of people were remarking how big the BMW felt compared to the other cars in the GT class, but it's the car in front, that CSL, that's just absolutely gorgeous. It's absolutely stunning shape. So back there is the one and only Nick Mason, drummer of Pink Floyd, legendary petrolhead and extremely wealthy car collector, sitting in his 250 GTO, a car that has pretty much been considered the most expensive car you can buy. And last month, one went on sale for $70 million. You think of how many cars you could actually buy for $70 million. Probably all the cars around it with change to spare. Most of the cars in about a 50-yard radius with money to spare, possibly. And Mr. Nick Mason there is the owner of one in mint condition, and it's being driven. Isn't that, how many things that cost $70 million? $70 million anything. Is someone willing to have hundreds of thousands of small explosions happen inside of and then propel it down a racing track at considerable speed? Robo racing, driverless race cars. I'm not sure I see the point yet. They look cool though. They look like Hot Wheels cars you had when you were a kid. So this era of Honda was the first time Honda ever won at Formula One, and that red dot and that red livery is what inspired the red badges on Honda Type Rs. Always nice to see them in the flesh, or in the metal rather. When you're at Goodwood, especially in the motorsport section, you often have to freely admit that you're not an expert on every single facet of every single motorsport. And especially the more American-inspired Indy cars or even drifting stuff, I'm completely ignorant of. But the point is, they're all here. You get to see them up close. You get to see cars you may not have otherwise made an effort to come and see. And then around the corner, you get the silk cut Jag. It's not just cars, obviously there's bikes as well, but I'm completely ignorant of them. Know nothing about bikes, other than that they have two wheels and go really, really quickly. In your head, you can walk around pretending to be a millionaire, drawing up a shopping list. Like, yep, got it, need it, got it, need it. And then as we move out of the
motorsport area. This is just a general showing off kind of place where people have come and parked their rides. Honda NSX, the new one. Absolutely love it. And then something a bit more rare. That's a Diablo GT. Very nice indeed. Very nice. Now there's quite a selection of Paganis over here. I'd wager actually more Paganis than I've ever seen in one place at one time, and I've been to the Pagani factory. Between Zondas and Huayras, they're pretty well represented, and they're just kind of casually plopped down here, not to mention a just casually left to its own devices McLaren Senna. That's not even parked in a prevalent position, it's just tucked away down at the back. It's quite impressive. And this marks kind of the end of the car section of the Goodwood Festival of Speed. We've walked all the way up from the bottom of the hill all the way to the top, and now on what is the most exclusive looking car park possibly in the world. It's been a hell of a show, but I think for sign off we're going to cut back to Future Drew in the studio.
And that's the end of FtLoC for this week. Thank you so much for watching. Get in touch with us on Twitter at Carfection, or follow along on our adventures on Instagram at Carfection Films. And you can follow me on any of the platforms at Drew Stern. But until next time, thanks for watching.